Hey everyone, my name's Amalu, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today I thought I'd try something a little bit different from what I've posted on here so far. I thought maybe instead of taking existing character designs and retrying them or redesigning them, I could try making my own completely original designs. This is for a project I've been wanting to do for a while now, and I'm hoping I can design all of the characters in this series. So yeah, let's jump right into it. So this series is called Faerie High, and in my mind it's like a companion to Ever After High and Monster High, specifically like the first generation of those two. It's supposed to be in a very similar vein. But in this case, instead of being monsters or the children of fairy tales, the students at Faerie High are, well, obviously, fairies. I had this idea, I think I was reading the Legend of Shadow High book, which is like the only official crossover Monster High and Ever After High got, which is a little bit tragic. I think they just mentioned a Faerie High just in passing, and that gave me the idea to take that concept and just run with it. And well, it was kind of perfect for me because I had another story I was working on at the time that already had to do with fairies. So I thought it would be really fun to turn this into kind of like an alternate universe for this story. I feel like as we go along and I design more characters, it'll be more clear which designs came from the original story and which ones I made specifically for Faerie High. I guess the core concept for this series is that each student is a different type of fairy, and I'm really loose with the definition of what I consider to be a fairy. If you couldn't tell, the character I'm currently drawing on screen is supposed to be a mermaid, so they're not all quite what you traditionally think of when you hear the word fairy. Each character is inspired by folklore, both from ancient times and from modern times, because I think it's really cool that we still have a lot of folklore that survives today in things like the Tooth Fairy and St. Patrick's Day. That was something I wanted to incorporate into the designs and just the overall feel of the world. So the character I'm designing right now on screen is called Nora Neptune. And like I said before, she is a mermaid. She doesn't have a tail in this version because I feel like it's become such a pop culture staple for mermaids to have legs when they come on land and tails when they go back in the water, so that's kind of what I pictured for her. I actually wrote descriptions for all of these characters, so I'm just gonna read off of Nora's really fast. Nora Neptune is a mermaid who comes from the deep ocean. She's quiet and often not as expressive as other louder fairies. It's not that she doesn't care, it's just that she's incredibly introspective and prefers thinking over talking, a habit she started once she learned that her voice can enchant others. This is her first time living on land for an extended period of time, so she can get homesick easily. Life in the sea is very different from life on land, and even though this is her second year at Faerie High, she's still earning her land legs. You'll never see her without her iconic sun hat to protect her sensitive, often dry, skin. Her favorite way to pass the time is by painting with watercolors. So yeah, there is definitely a lot of inspiration from the Little Mermaid story when it came to designing her personality. I didn't want to do a complete ripoff because, well, if this was going to be a sister series to Ever After High, we obviously can't have actual fairy tales or the children of fairy tales running around. There is kind of one exception to this rule though, but she's not included in this video, so we won't talk about her. The two characters I included in this video, while they were definitely inspired by characters from fairy tales, they're not meant to be their children, more like a spiritual successor and a source of inspiration. For Nora's fashion sense, I really wanted to lean into the mermaid core aesthetic because, well, it's just too perfect. She's a mermaid, of course she's gonna wear mermaid core. On the side you can see a preview of her outfit and what she is going to end up looking a lot like. That pose she's standing in is actually A drawing I did that was supposed to be of Cleo from G3. I'll put up the picture of the actual doll it was inspired by. But after I drew that pose, I realized I could use it as a base to test out different outfits and colors for most of my Faerie High girls. So you might be seeing a lot of that pose in later videos. The sketch next to it is from a lot of really small thumbnail sketches I did of poses that would be more in character for each character. And since Nora is so shy, I definitely changed up the pose a little bit because I think it looked just a little too assertive for her personality. In my first sketches, I gave her a very stereotypical mermaid top that left the midriff completely exposed. But I felt like that was a little too obvious, and I also wanted to try to make something that looked at least a little bit like you could wear it to school. I mean, I'm not sure her final design would fly past most school dress codes either, but it's at least a little bit closer. I also originally gave her a mermaid skirt, but I also felt that that was a little too obvious and maybe a little too boring. It wasn't until after I saw these flared jeans on Pinterest, and then also the Disney Illy Ursula doll, that I realized doing some flared pants would be really fun for her. And it would still keep that mermaid silhouette I was going for. I also gave her a really big sun hat, and in her character description I mentioned that it's to protect her skin from the sun. I decided that since she's a mermaid and has lived underwater for most of her life, she's probably not super used to being in direct sunlight, so she probably has really sensitive skin. But the more meta reason I included the hat is just because I thought it made her have a really beachy vibe, and that's honestly what I was going for. And for the shoes, I saw this picture of these Starfish sandals, and I thought it was perfect. I didn't want to give her really complicated or uncomfortable shoes because she's not used to having feet. She just wants to be comfortable. Then obviously I included a lot of pearls. I also did this little puka shell belt that has a little starfish at the end. I actually really loved playing around with Starfish and her design so much. You can see there's one on her belt and then another one on her hat, and then obviously her shoes. Another thing I played around was doing lots of sheer flowy fabric. You can see it on her fake little sleeves and at the bottom of her skirt, shirt, dress thing. I really don't know what to call it. And I also included it at the bottom of her pants. I played around with the idea of making her legs transparent at the bottom, but I decided it looked a little weird with the pants, so I made the bottom of the pants transparent instead. And they're kind of supposed to look like gills. I don't know if that comes across super clear, but that's what I was going for. I also tried to give her some fin-shaped ears, but they ended up looking really weird, especially with the sun hat and my designs. But I didn't want her to just look like a normal human girl, so I came up with the idea of giving her these little scale dots. You can see them underneath her eyes and on her shoulders. I didn't make them look too much like scales. I was kind of going more for markings you would see on a fish. And in my mind they glow in the dark because she comes from the deep ocean, and lots of fish from very deep parts of the ocean glow in the dark, and I thought that would be really cool for a mermaid. She also has wavy hair because, well, she's a mermaid, and waves and ocean, and I know I'm such a creative genius that no one has ever come up with this idea before. And you can't really see it because her hat is blocking it, but she does have two fishtail braids that kind of pin her hair to the side above her ear. You can see it more in my sketch. Her hair also ombres from a pretty dark teal to an even more darker teal. I wanted it to look like the ocean slowly getting darker. I think in my original drawing her hair actually looks a little bit more like blue kelp, which, that works too. As far as her personality goes, I talked about it in her character description, but she's just very quiet and very calm. She often gives her classmates the impression that she is not as enthusiastic about life, I guess, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. She just has a very subdued personality, so she doesn't express her excitement and her emotions as outwardly as a lot of her peers do. She's very shy and introspective, and she thinks very deeply. She loves art, and her favorite way to express herself is through watercolor paintings. Usually they're abstract or show landscapes from her home back in the ocean. Honestly, her personality is one that I relate to a lot because I'm not very expressive, so you could accuse me of having a self-insert here, but it's whatever. Here she is. I really liked how she turned out. I do think the clear pant legs look a little bit strange, but they look a lot less strange than the clear legs did. And I'm also seeing that there's some messy parts on her sandals, which are really gonna bother me, so I might have to go back and fix those soon. Overall though, I'm really happy with how she turned out, and I like her a lot. Okay, on to the second character, which is actually the first one I drew, but I don't have footage for her. So that's so much fun. But this is Suzu Campana. Suzu Campana is an energetic and outgoing pixie. Her bubbly, high-energy personality makes her a fantastic cheer fairy. But beware, that energy can also turn into a fiery temper. Suzu is known to jinx a classmate from time to time, but they usually deserve it, or so she says. Suzu has a passion for tinkering. She's most often found crafting jewelry from recycled things in the tinkering studio. Her life's philosophy is that all things should have a home, especially if that home is in an accessory. Her one-of-a-kind jewelry designs are gradually gaining popularity among her peers, and she hopes to go pro one day. For now, though, she's content making pieces for her friends, and the patrons of her pixie store. Yeah, I don't know if it's obvious yet, but she's very much a spiritual successor and inspired a lot by Tinkerbell, especially in the Tinkerbell movies. While I call her a pixie, and she is in part inspired by folklore about pixies, she's more based off of the very stereotypical image we have of fairies today, which came from the Victoria era, I believe. But I had to have at least one stereotypical fairy, so I think I can get a pass here. So obviously I had to give her a pixie cut, because she's a pixie. Once again, I know I'm breaking barriers and being so creative. And then I based her fashion a bit on the aesthetic of fairycore, which, again, it's very obvious, but it just fits her so well. I love her petal skirt, and her top is supposed to look a little bit like butterfly wings. I don't know if I did a very good job of it in this picture, but she's just supposed to look like she's covered in flowers and butterflies. She's also covered in jewelry. I decided if I was going to give her the personality of loving jewelry, then I had to actually make sure she was dressed in jewelry. This may or may not be completely inspired by the fact that Rainbow High had a character that loved making jewelry, and she barely wore any jewelry, and it made me so sad. So yeah, she's wearing lots of bracelets, lots of rings. I gave her 2 piercings, which I don't know if I've ever actually seen a doll have 2 piercings in each ear, so if this were actually a doll line, I don't know if this would be possible, but again, I know nothing about customizing dolls or the process of doll making, so I don't know how well these designs would translate to dolls. The little pouch on her hip is supposed to be for pixie dust. I don't actually know the role pixie dust would play in this universe, but I feel like it's such an integral part of modern fairy folklore that I couldn't not include it. Also, her shoes are a direct homage to Tinkerbell with the little flower puffs on them. I also came up with the wing heel at like the very last second. She was just gonna have a normal heel at first. And then I realized I could make it look like a little wing, so I thought that was fun. I struggled drawing her wings so much, and I'm kind of thankful that most of the fairies in the rest of this series do not have wings, because it was such a pain to draw, and I think they look okay. I don't think they look as good as they could have, but they look okay, they're passable. And I don't know how well you can see it, but I gave her this really interesting makeup look that I once again saw on Pinterest. Pinterest was definitely like my best friend for this project. I thought it looked really ethereal and like light and magical, so I thought it fit the vibe of a fairy really well. But yeah, this is Suzu. She's temperamental and she's spirited, but generally upbeat and outgoing. She's also Nora's best friend. I thought it would be fun if you had this really like excitable, outgoing girl who is like best friends with this really quiet, like people barely ever hear her speak girl, and they just balance each other out so well, and nobody understands why they're friends, but they don't need anybody to understand why they're friends. Their friendship just works. But yeah, here they are together. I think they both look really cute. Ask me again in like a month and I'll probably hate these drawings. But yeah, this was my first installment in the Faerie High design series. I've got 14 characters to go, and that's not even all the characters I had ideas for, but I didn't want to completely kill myself over this design project, so I'm limiting it to 16, which is still a lot. But if you're interested in learning more about these characters and this world, I might start a dedicated Tumblr blog to Faerie High or something. I'm not really sure. But there's just so much lore I've created for this world, and it's so much, it's not even funny, and it's distracting me from other projects I'm working on. But I've just had so much fun making these characters, and I can't wait to share more. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching till the end if you're still here, and I hope you have a wonderful day.